Hey, good morning. How y'all doing? It is Well Red Beard. It's a damn fine day to talk about some books, and today we're here for a Top 5 Friday, and we're going to talk about my top 5 Stephen King books. Now, it's a weird thing. I'm 48 years old. The vast majority of these books I read when I was young, um, and a lot of them, I'm in the middle of this like Stephen King reread. I've probably reread 10 or 12 of his books in the last couple years while keeping up with the new stuff and recently finished the Dark Tower. I hadn't gotten all the way through that until now, basically. And again, this midlife crisis thing of mine is kind of wanting to know and be able to say, all right, these are my top five, and that's it. That's where I stand today. I cannot get my glasses clean. So am I like super tied to this top five? I think so, for the most part. Like I said, I've been rereading, and some of those have been situations that like just really reiterated that that's a badass book. Some of them have been books that I would have told you were my favorite a long time ago, and now they're kind of not. And so, anyway, top five with some honorable mentions, and that's where it is. That is where my top five Stephen Kings are as of January 10th, 2025. So, some honorable mentions. Look, I recently read You Like It Darker. You Like It Darker. I love that book, and mostly because it pulled me out of a slump. It brought back all the nostalgia of reading King as a kid. I read it in October of this year. There's something about holding a new Stephen King in your hands in the month of October. So I really like that book, and I gave it 5 stars. And because of that, I was like, well, it's got to be in my top five, then, doesn't it? I'm just not comfortable putting You Like It Darker in my top five yet. It might be eventually. A couple other books that I want to mention, The Shining. I love the lore of The Shining. I love the Overlook Hotel. It is the book I come back to every time when I talk about how much I love setting and how oftentimes setting is my favorite character. I really like that book, but it's one of those rare occurrences where I personally, and a lot of people disagree on this, I personally like the film better than the book. And I reread the book last year and a half ago, something like that. And because of how much I love the imagery of the film and the aspects of the film, hedge maze versus hedge animals and so forth, and um, I I dropped that one down. Matter of fact, when I reread it, I think I only gave it 3 stars, which, to be honest with you, that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, I love again the book, and I love the fact that the film exists because of the book, and The Shining is one of my faves, but it's just not going to make it in my top five today. So if we were going today, I'd probably call it number 6 or so. I'm in the midst of rereading it. I loved it when I was younger. I mean, were we scared of clowns before it, or are we scared of clowns because of it? I don't know the exact answer to that. For me, I know coming up, Ronald McDonald was a big thing. I was never scared of that dude. And then this came out, and all of a sudden, we all have a somewhat fear of clowns. I will say on reread, I think it's a little lengthy, a little bit. You know, could have rewrote the same story with the same premise, I think, in half the pages. But I do love again what this book is. But this is probably one of the ones like The Shining where, like on reread, I'm liking it maybe a bit less than I thought I did. Than it was built up to in my head. Does that make sense? So yeah. So all right, here we go. Top five. Again, a couple of these I just love, and a couple of these I've recently reread, and I love them even more than I thought I did. So, number five for me is The Stand. Just again, love this story, love its ties to the Dark Tower, love it more though than any book in the Dark Tower series. Again, I'm a Stephen King horror reader. I am a I'm not really much of a fantasy reader, so I've made it through the Dark Tower, but they're not my favorites. I do like the way it kind of ties all this stuff together, though. Love the fact that Randall Flagg's in both, and so on and so forth. But love the Stand. I will say that again, I can't get behind "Baby Can You Dig Your Man." I just think that's an absolute shitty song, but that's just me. But The Stand, Stephen King is my number five. Now, there are a few of these books that really really scared me when I was young, and I mean early pre-15, 13, 14, whatever. And one of them was Pet Cemetery. So Pet Cemetery is my fourth on the list. It's one of his, like, for me, like, the shorter novels that stand out as much as something like Pet Cemetery does. That's kind of what does it for me. But this book was creepy, and I don't know if it was my first instance of being afraid of a child, of the creepy kid stuff. I mean, there's a lot of it, the Omen, the William March's, what's the Bad Seed, of course, there's a lot of stuff like that. But for me, this might have been my first instance of that. And I just remember this book put me on edge. So my number fourth is Pet Cemetery. And again, it's hard for me to read some of these newer King books and be like, yeah, that's better than those classic King books. I don't know. I remember really, really liking Revival, but I'm gonna have to reread Revival and see, where that falls. But this is, it's just something that, as a reader, as a horror reader, as a booktuber or whatever, constantly think about it. You want to have the answer, and sometimes the answer is, okay, this is the answer right now, and probably be constantly evolving, like anything. But so my number three, and this is one that I reread um last year, and it's Misery, and it just knocked it out of the park for me. I mean, again, the film is good. It is not better than the book in this case. The book is more extreme than the film. The hobbling scene and this and that. Just the the fact that this entire book is carried by two characters. It just, I mean, I loved it, and yeah, I mean, I love the as a guy that for me, because when I read it the first time, I was just a reader, and I'm still just a reader. But as a guy that is somewhat of a book critic, I guess you would say, you know, um, watching, our characters go back and forth over the way the author has chosen to take his character, that was kind of cool. But anyway, yeah, this is number three, Misery, Stephen King. My number two, and I've got to reread these, but one of my favorite King books, and thus King adaptations, is Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. And this particular book has got three stories in it that became fairly popular movies. Of course, Shawshank, The Body, which is Stand By Me. I don't remember much about The Breathing Method. I will be honest there. And of course, Apt Pupil, which was a movie back in the 90s with a young, was that Ethan Hawke? I mean, God, it feels like yesterday. That's how old I am. But, it was maybe not a popular movie, but a Hollywood big picture, that was in the theaters and whatnot. And so, I think when I saw those films, I don't think I knew. I mean, I don't think I knew that they were all in the same book: Apt Pupil, The Body, and the Shawshank Redemption. So this is my number two. Shawshank Redemption's probably you know, I mean, one of my tops. I mean, on its own, it could possibly be my second ranked Stephen King story. But when you put all those together in one book, that's what makes Different Seasons my second favorite Stephen King book. Now, here's my number one, and it is Salem's Lot. I reread this one in the last year, and it just, you know, reinforced how much I loved it, how frightening it is. I'm not even really a vampire fiction fan. Like I like monsters, mythological vampires, werewolves, creatures, whatever. They don't often really do it for me, but just the way this is written, I mean, it was kind of my introduction to. It wasn't my first King book. It was my introduction, I think, to really being afraid as a kid when I was reading a book. So much so I remember that I couldn't leave it on my bedside table at night. I'm being honest with you. Like I had to put this shit away. But I reread this, just loved it, loved the characters, loved the setting, loved the town of Jerusalem's Lot. Loved, you know, the villains, the horror elements, everything about it. And like I said, I'm not really a vampire guy. So this is my number one. I would have told you because I read this and The Shining recently, last year, year and a half, and I did them back to back because those two were the ones I was like, Salem's Lot and The Shining, Salem's Lot and The Shining. Those are my two favorites. And like I said, The Shining kind of dropped, which is weird, but Salem's Lot really went up in my mind. So that's it. That's where we're at today. It's hard. It's hard to kind of commit to something like that. But if somebody asks me tomorrow what my favorite Stephen King books are, I can give them my top five relatively quickly without too much internal argument. So Salem's Lot's number one. This has been Well Red Beard. This has been a top five Friday. This has been my very, very shaky top five Stephen King books of all time. So hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're enjoying all your books, all of them, as much as I am. If not, you're reading the wrong damn books.